Today I'm going to tell you a story so powerful it will leave you breathless. Set in the unforgiving American West, where red cliffs burn beneath the sunset, and silence can mean salvation or death. It's a land where survival is earned with blood and love is carved from hardship. This is a place where fate collides with violence, where the desert keeps secrets beneath its dust. It all began with a single column of smoke rising into an empty sky. Something small, almost ordinary, yet enough to change two lives forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The Dustfall Caravan had been smoldering for 2 full days when Talon found her. Smoke still curled into the pale sky, rising from the charred ribs of 12 wagons that had once carried 40 hopeful souls toward California. Talon had been trailing a band of wild mustangs through the red rock country when the scent of ash pulled him east toward ruin. The Black Spurs had done their work clean and cruel. They'd taken the horses, the rifles, the flour and sugar, the young women who could be sold, the strong men who could be broken. What they left behind lay scattered across the desert like debris after a twister. Splintered trunks, shredded quilts, blood-darkened sand. Talon spent most of that first day burying the dead. Even strangers deserved dirt over their bones instead of coyotes at their throats. She was the only one breathing. He found her huddled in a narrow ravine, arms wrapped tight around herself, dress torn, skin bruised in ways that needed no explanation. Her eyes were gray and empty, like winter clouds before a storm. She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't try to run. She simply looked up at him and waited for whatever came next. Talon had seen that look before, in the faces of the stonewalkers after the long walk. In people who had lost so much that loss itself stopped meaning anything. He crouched slowly, palms open where she could see them, and spoke in the English he'd learned from Silas Wren at the trading post. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. Something flickered in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the faintest spark of it. "I'm taking you somewhere safe. Can you stand?" She didn't answer. She just pushed herself up on shaking legs and followed when he turned west. For 3 days she walked behind him without a word. She ate when he handed her food, drank when he passed her water, slept when he told her it was time. She moved like a ghost, body present, spirit somewhere far beyond reach. So Talon talked. He spoke into the silence about the canyon where he was born, about sorrel weaving blankets the color of sunset, about breaking horses under wide-open sky. He didn't know if she heard him. He spoke anyway. Silence would have left her alone with whatever darkness had swallowed her whole. On the 4th day, her voice finally came. "My name is Mara Ellison," she said, the words rough, unused. "I taught school in Ohio. My husband, Edwin Ellison, he said California would give us a better life." Edwin had been among the first to fall, she told him. Shot through the chest before he could even raise his rifle. From the ravine she'd watched the Black Spurs move through the Dustfall Caravan with cold efficiency. She didn't describe what happened before she crawled back into hiding. She didn't have to. The bruises told enough. Talon listened without interrupting, without pity in his face. When she finished, he said only, "You're still here. That's what matters." She looked at him then, not with hope, not yet, but with something softer, a beginning. He brought her home to the shadow of the red cliffs, where spring water ran clear and eagles nested high above. Sorrel, 60 winters strong, took one look at Mara and understood everything worth knowing. Without a single question, she began to heal her. She mixed crushed herbs for the bruises, brewed bitter teas to chase off nightmares, wrapped Mara in quiet care that demanded nothing in return. No sermons, no prying, just steady hands. Talon kept his distance, giving her room. Still, his gaze found her often, sitting in the doorway at dusk while the cliffs burned gold, helping Sorel card wool, staring at the horizon as if measuring whether the world was safe again. Light crept back into her eyes slowly, like dawn easing into a valley after a long night. She was beautiful, not in the fragile way of someone broken, but in flashes. The curve of her cheek when she smiled at Sorel's teasing, the tilt of her head when she listened, the way her wheat-colored hair caught fire in the sunset. Weeks turned to months. Mara learned words in Talon's language, stumbling over sounds while Sorel laughed and corrected her gently. She learned to grind corn, to weave simple patterns. The school teacher in her clung to knowledge even as her heart stitched itself back together. And she learned Talon, his quiet strength, his patience wide as the canyon walls, the way he handled horses with murmured words that seemed to reach somewhere deeper than language, the way he treated Sorel with reverence, the certainty in his stride that made her feel, for the first time in months, like solid ground might still exist. She watched him, and somewhere along the way, she began wanting him to watch her back, not as something fragile to be pitied, but as a woman worth seeing. That frightened her. She had once been a wife. She had trusted a man. That trust had carried her west and into fire, blood, and widowhood. Some nights she wondered if she'd died in that ravine and was living now in some strange in-between. How could she want again? How could she trust again? How could she give herself to anyone when she barely knew who she was? The answer came under a moonless sky thick with stars. She woke from the nightmare, the same one that still chased her despite Sorel's tease. Gunshots, screams, hands dragging her. She stepped outside the hogan, needing open sky to remind her she wasn't trapped. Talon was already there, seated on a flat rock, staring up at the constellations. When he saw her, he shifted without a word, making space beside him. They sat shoulder to shoulder in silence. The warmth of him slowly loosened the tight knot in her chest. "I keep thinking I should leave," Mara said at last. "I've stayed too long. I ought to head for California, or back to Ohio. Somewhere." The words fell apart because they weren't true. This canyon, Sorel, the sound of Talon's voice, this had become the closest thing to home she'd ever known. Talon was quiet. Then he turned to her. In his dark eyes she saw it. Want, steady and restrained, but undeniable. The desire in Talon's eyes was steady, banked deep like embers waiting on a breath of wind. "Is that truly what you want?" he asked quietly. "To ride away?" Mara parted her lips, ready to say yes. Yes would have been easier. Yes would have kept her heart safe, locked tight behind walls she understood. But the word refused to come. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "No, I don't want to go. I want—" Her voice failed her. Talon's gaze never wavered. "You want to stay with me?" It wasn't asked like a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." That single word shifted the air between them. She saw it in the way his shoulders squared, in the slow draw of his breath, in the way his eyes dropped to her mouth before lifting again with a heat that sent warmth rushing through her veins. "Then stay," he said, his voice roughened by feeling. "Stay, and let me show you what it means to be wanted by a man who knows your value." His hand rose to her cheek, calloused palm gentle against her skin. That softness undid her more surely than any force could have. When his lips touched hers, something inside her gave way. A barrier she hadn't known she was still guarding. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was careful, searching, a conversation without words. When he finally drew back, His eyes held hers, as if he were reading the very marrow of her. She understood then that everything before this moment had only been the road leading here. What followed didn't resemble the courtship she'd known back in Ohio. There were no parlor visits, no stiff walks under watchful eyes, no careful negotiations between families. Here, love was woven into daily life. The brush of fingers over shared work, the weight of a glance across firelight, the quiet building of trust stronger than iron. Talon never hurried her. He seemed to understand that healing wasn't a straight trail, that some parts of her were still shuttered tight. So he waited. He brought her canyon wildflowers, taught her the names of stars in his tongue, stood beside her at sunset while the cliffs blazed copper and violet. Sorrel watched in silence, her knowing gaze warm. At night, Mara sometimes heard her singing softly over her loom. Songs Talon later told her were wedding songs. Blessings meant to last a lifetime. The night everything changed felt ordinary at first. They had eaten together, the three of them, laughter easy in the lamplight. Sorrel retired early, casting her son a look that made Mara's cheeks burn. She and Talon remained by the fire inside the hogan, closer than they would have dared months before. Her shoulder rested against his arm. Her hand lay lightly on his thigh. Outside, the wind carried a low, lonely note through the canyon. "There's something I need to tell you," Mara said, barely above a whisper. "About that day, before you found me." Talon stilled beside her, giving her his full attention. That was what she cherished most. How he listened as if nothing else in the world existed. She had never spoken the whole truth, not even to Sorrel. But if Talon was to claim her future, he deserved her past. So she told him. She told him about the gunfire, the chaos, the men who found her hiding place, the hands that dragged her out, the fight that left her crawling back into the ravine, certain she would die there. Her voice trembled. Tears fell freely. At some point his arms wrapped around her, holding her steady while months of buried poison spilled out in sobs. When she finished, she felt hollowed out, terrified to meet his eyes. But there was no revulsion there. No pity. Only a fierce, blazing tenderness. "You are not what they did to you," Talon said, his voice thick with feeling. "You are what you survived. You are what you chose to become afterward. You are the woman who walked out of that ravine and kept walking, the woman who let herself heal, the woman who found the courage to want again." He lifted her face gently, brushing away tears with his thumbs. "I've watched you these past months, Mara Ellison. I've seen you rise from ashes. I've seen you grow stronger, brighter than before they ever tried to break you. I don't want you despite your scars, and I don't want you because of them. I want you because you are you, the woman I've come to love more than anything under this sky." When something inside her broke open completely. She kissed him then, not careful this time, but fierce, hungry with months of restrained longing. He answered her with equal fire, pulling her close until no space remained between them. They parted only when breath demanded it. In the glow of the fire, she saw the unspoken question still burning in his eyes. "Come with me," Talon said softly. "Outside. I want to show you something." He took her hand and led her into the night. Stars spilled across the sky like crushed silver. The red cliffs gleamed pale beneath moonlight. They walked to a small alcove carved into the canyon wall, sheltered from wind, sand soft beneath their boots. Blankets were already spread there. Her pulse thundered when she realized what he had prepared. "Here," he said quietly, "under the open sky. Let the spirits bear witness. This is where I want to make you mine." She should have felt fear. She should have felt memory clawing at her, Instead, standing before him, seeing only patience, love, and steady desire in his eyes, she felt something else entirely. Readiness. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I want that. I want to be yours." Talon guided her gently down onto the blankets. When he lay beside her, the solid warmth of him felt nothing like the hands that had once hurt her. It felt chosen, safe, different. And for the first time, she didn't flinch from being held, and touched by a man who truly saw her, who knew her scars and still reached for her whole. Talon's hands moved slowly, never hurried, learning her through layers of fabric as if each inch mattered. Every touch drew sounds from Mara she barely recognized. Soft breaths, quiet tremors rising from someplace deep and newly awakened. When his fingers found the small buttons at her collar, he stopped. His eyes lifted to hers in a silent question. She nodded. One button, then another. As the night air slipped across her skin, a sudden wave of shame struck, sharp and instinctive. Memory surged without warning. Other hands. Rough hands. Violence where there should have been tenderness. Before she could stop herself, she covered her chest, arms crossing tight in defense. Her body reacted faster than her heart. Want tangled with fear, leaving her shaking. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across Talon's face. Then understanding settled in, steady and sure. He did not pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, placing his hands gently over hers, where they pressed against her skin. His forehead rested against hers. Their breaths mingled. The world narrowed until it held only the rhythm of two heartbeats. "Mara," he murmured, her name low and reverent. "Look at me." She did. There was no impatience in his eyes, no frustration, only a depth of love that seemed endless, love that would wait as long as she needed. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said quietly. "I won't hurt you. I won't use you. I won't leave you broken. I want to show you what it feels like to be loved by a man who knows your worth. But I need your trust. I need you to let me see you, not because I'm owed that, but because I choose you. Because you're strong. Because you're beautiful. Because you're mine, and I want to see what's mine." His words didn't demand. They asked. That difference broke something loose inside her. Her hands trembled beneath his. He felt it and tightened his hold just enough to steady her. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Talon answered. "But you don't have to be scared of me. Not now. Not ever. Not with this." Slowly, never forcing, he guided her hands away. He gave her time to resist, to stop him if she needed. She didn't. She let her arms fall, let the starlight touch her bare skin, let his gaze rest on her without flinching. And something extraordinary happened. The shame began to melt. In its place rose warmth, steady and right. He wasn't staring. He was beholding her. Scars, history, every fragile piece. There was no judgment in his face, only wonder, only choice. What followed felt less like possession and more like a sacred promise. Talon touched her as if she were something holy. His hands moved with patience, reading her breath, her shivers, the subtle shifts of her body. He asked silent questions with every caress, and she answered with trembling sighs as desire, long buried, unfolded like sunrise over canyon stone. He found places she thought were numb forever, traced warmth across her skin until fear gave way to longing. Through it all, his eyes never left her face, making certain she was present, that each moment was chosen. When she reached for him, he welcomed it. Let her hands explore him, the way he had explored her. Let her learn the strength and warmth of him beneath the open sky. They moved together beneath the sweep of stars, two souls who had survived fire and found each other anyway. When they finally joined completely, it was not just flesh meeting flesh. It was return. It was home. Tears slid down her cheeks. Talon kissed them away. He whispered words in his language, soft, sacred syllables she would one day understand. When she later asked him what they meant, he would only smile and say, "Some things don't belong in English." Afterward, they lay wrapped together on the blankets, her head resting over his heart, his fingers drawing lazy circles along her back. Above them, the stars turned in their ancient paths. Somewhere in the canyon, a nightbird called, lonely and beautiful. Mara felt changed. Not healed in some sudden miracle, she knew the trail of recovery bent and twisted. There would still be hard mornings, still be shadows. But something essential had shifted. She had allowed herself to be seen at her most vulnerable, and had been met not with harm, but with love that asked nothing and offered everything. She had learned her body was still hers, that closeness did not have to mean violence, that trust could be rebuilt from splinters. She had learned what it meant to belong not as property, but as partner. "I love you," she said softly. The words came without effort, as if they had been waiting all along. "I love you, and I want the rest of my life to be learning what that means." Talon's arms tightened around her. He pressed a slow kiss to her hair. "Then stay," he said, echoing the promise beneath the stars. "Stay and let me love you today, tomorrow, every day after. Let me remind you who you are." They married in the old way, 4 days of ceremony beneath open sky. Gray Elk spoke blessings drawn from generations. Sorrel wove them a wedding blanket that told their story in thread. The rising sun for new beginnings, mountains for strength, two figures walking side by side toward an endless horizon. Mara learned Talon's language fluently. She taught the Red Cliff children to read and write in English. She became a bridge between worlds that had too often stood at odds. Years passed. Children were born. The Ellison line grew strong. They endured lean winters, celebrated harvests, weathered sorrow and joy alike. Life gathered around them like rings in a tree, steady and enduring. Yet she never forgot that night beneath the stars, when shame had nearly stolen her voice, and Talon had shown her that being seen was not violation, but gift. They grew old together in the shadow of the red cliffs, watching grandchildren run through canyon dust, listening to wind move across stone. And even after decades, Talon still looked at her with that same quiet wonder, the look that said, "Every day, I choose you." They watched their children grow strong beneath the canyon sun, then watched their grandchildren run wild across the same red earth. Seasons turned. The world beyond the cliffs shifted in ways both promising and cruel. When the reservation lines were drawn and new rules pressed in from Washington, life tightened. Freedom narrowed. Yet with those hardships came a stubborn resolve. The language would not be forgotten. The ceremonies would not fade. The old ways that had carried the stonewalkers through suffering would endure. Mara Ellison became a living archive. She told stories by firelight, stories of the Dustfall Caravan, of survival, of Talon's quiet courage. She spoke of Sorrel's wisdom and Gray Elk's blessings. She carried both worlds inside her and proved, simply by living, that the line between them had never been as fixed as men in offices claimed. Talon remained exactly who he had always been, steady, patient, strong as canyon rock. A horseman whose hands gentled even the wildest stallion. A healer whose silence held more comfort than most words. Even after 40 years, he still looked at Mara the way he had that first night under the stars. With wonder, with hunger softened by reverence. When his time came, it came quietly. He died in her arms as the sun slipped behind the cliffs. She had always known it would be that way. His final words were spoken in his own sacred tongue. She understood them now. She kept them to herself. Some things are too holy for the world. She lived 10 more years after Talon was gone. Every morning she climbed the hill overlooking their home and sat beside his grave. She spoke to him as if he were only out riding. She told their great-grandchildren stories of courage and love, of what it meant to choose each other every day. The Ellison line listened wide-eyed, carrying those stories forward. When Mara's own time arrived, she slipped away gently. Sorel's wedding blanket, faded but strong, rested around her shoulders. There was a quiet smile on her face. They laid her beside Talon, just as she had asked. On the stone that marked their resting place, their descendants carved words in 2 languages, side by side. In English it read, "Two souls who found each other." In Talon's language, the meaning ran deeper. 2 who saw and were seen, and in that seeing became one. The wind still moves through that canyon. Sagebrush still scents the air. Eagles still cry from the heights. The old Hogans are gone now, replaced by newer homes and newer lives. But the red cliffs remain, silent witnesses to everything that unfolded in their shadow. And sometimes, when the night is still and the stars burn bright, high mesa riders passing through swear they hear something carried on the wind. A woman's voice. Not fully English, not fully Talon's tongue. Something woven between the 2. It sounds almost like laughter, almost like tears, almost like love given breath. Most don't understand what they're hearing, but those who know the story of Mara Ellison and Talon, those who remember what was built there against every hardship, understand. Some loves are stronger than death. Some bonds stretch beyond flesh and years. What is claimed with devotion and surrendered in trust does not end. Somewhere in that canyon, beneath the endless sky, 2 souls still find each other, still see each other, still whisper into the dark, "You are beautiful. You are mine. Let me show you what you are worth." Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal/disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audio-visual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.